Welcome to another Rec to Resto episode. So recently I've just completed all the rust repairs on this front subframe for the HGU. Figured while I was at it, I'll just do a quick video on a bit of a rundown of what's involved and what tools it takes to undertake a job like this. A lot of it is just basic hand tools, but I'll just give you a quick rundown with some of the stuff that I've basically gathered over the years. It's not just stuff that I've gone out and bought straight away. It's as I've done the jobs, I've just slowly got more and more tools, and it's a good way to build your tool collection as well. So with doing a job like this, the first one that you're going to need is a decent welder. When I started doing rust repairs many years ago, I started off with a $100 SIG weld. It was just a little MIG, it was gas and gasless. And I got myself out of trouble a lot of times just with that little cheap welder. Obviously, as I've progressed, I wanted a welder that I could do a little bit more with, and that's where I've ended up with the Uni MIG that's behind me. This one is a MIG, but it's also an AC and a DC TIG, and you can also stick weld with it. So this welder does absolutely everything that I can ever need, and it's perfect for doing the thin sheet metal rust repairs, but also being a TIG, I can do a lot more of the small controlled stuff when you're doing thin sheet metal and stainless exhausts and aluminium and all that sort of stuff. I can do it all with one machine. I've recently just built this trolley for it so I can easily move it around the workshop, because it is obviously quite a big heavy welder, and being a MIG and a TIG, it uses two different types of gas. So I did the trolley wide enough so that I could fit both bottles on the one trolley. Moving on to some of the hand tools. If you've ever done work like this before, you'll soon realise how annoying it is when you're going between cutting and grinding and wire wheeling and sanding. If you've only got one grinder, you're forever changing discs. I've got myself two cordless ones. So this is a 4.5 inch Makita. I've taken the guard off because I just run this one with the sand. So this is just a resin 36 grit sanding disc. It's really good for getting the material off quickly. I've also got another cordless one that I can use for cutting or grinding or whatever I'm doing at the time. These are good just for little bits and pieces, but if you're doing long jobs or if you've got a lot of cutting and a lot of sanding and grinding to do, I'd always go for a corded one. So this is a 5 inch, it's just an AEG. It's really good for that sort of stuff. I've also got another Makita corded one that I normally just run a wire wheel on it. I'll show you that one. So this grinder it's getting pretty old. It has seen better days, but normally I just run this one just with the little wire wheel. As you can see, this wire wheel needs to go in the bin. So I'll get a new one for this. So this grinder here is just dedicated just for wire wheeling on this one. This one here I've got a big thick heavy wire wheel. So that one there, if I need to use that, I normally use this grinder for it. Obviously, if you're using any power tools, anything like that, safety is important. Even if you're working in the shed at home, you've still got to look after your hearing and your sight and your hands. So yeah, always carry some glasses, some gloves. I've got different gloves depending on what I'm doing, but these are actually TIG welding gloves. I've also got some thicker MIG ones, and I've also just got some normal leather rigger gloves that I use as well. Sometimes when you've got to get in places and sand and grind, the bigger grinders, you just can't quite get in there and do what you need to do. I picked up this little pneumatic sander, and it's got one of the Rolex quick discs on it. So these aren't the cheapest things in the world, but they're really, really good for being able to get into those tight spots and sand the MIG welds off where you want to make them look a bit nicer. So that's a really, really good investment. That's one of the Shimano ones. You can just get them at most different tool shops. Really, really handy. I've also got an air die grinder I use a fair bit for similar purposes where you can't get that in. You can run burrs on them, or you can run the rotary sanding discs. They work really well. Moving on, if you're working on thin sheet metal, quite often it gives you a better finish is using tin snips instead of using a grinder to cut it out. So I've got the 3 different, so these are obviously straight cuts, and then I've got some lefts and some rights. Also, the other thing that's quite handy is a selection of files, just to be able to get in places and tidy up those sharp edges and burrs and things like that. The other thing I use a fair bit is just a little orbital sander. If you want to tidy up the metal before you weld it in, just give it a quick orbital, and it gives you a nice clean finish ready to weld in. Also, if you're sanding paint and all the rest of it, they come in handy as well. If you're shaping metal, obviously you're going to need hammers and dollies and things like that. I started out just with some pretty cheap dollies. As you can see, I've given these ones a bit of a sand and a polish. The thing that I found with the hammers and the dollies is if you give yourself a nice clean start, it gives you a lot nicer finish, and it will actually transfer the mirror finish onto the metal that you're working, and it will just give you a lot cleaner job. This is the sort of finish that they come straight out of the box, so they are pretty rough. There's a lot of scratches in them, they're always quite rusty. That one there, I have given it a polish previously, but you can see that they do oxidise over time. So you need to keep them stored out of the weather, and also just give them a quick polish before you go to use them. You can never have enough clamps, so whenever you're working on things, you always want to secure it. So I've slowly, as I've been doing things, just continued my clamp collection. So I've got a heap of different F clamps, G clamps, vice grips, all different shaped jaws, because obviously depending what you're doing, you need to be able to fit them in different places. So if you can get a heap of different vice grips, they will come in handy. Other thing that I've touched on before is I keep all of my old screwdrivers, because quite often if you're working sheet metal and you need to be able to get in there and manipulate it, it's handy being able to just grind screwdrivers into whatever shape, whether you want a point or a flat. So I keep all my old ones that have the tips, I've snapped them off or whatever, and I can keep them to make whatever tools I need. And they've got me out of strife a lot. So if you've got old screwdrivers, these are old electrical ones, so I use them for work. When I don't need them anymore, they come into my toolbox here, and I'm not scared to cut them up if I need to. Same thing with little seal picks, you can use them as well for manipulating the sheet metal to get it so that it's nice and flush when you're welding it. Magnets, same thing, holding bits and pieces into place, it's always really handy. If you do a bit of this sort of stuff, what tools have you got that you'd recommend to everyone else? Leave them in the comments below. But this is pretty well the majority of the stuff that I use for doing my rust repairs and sheet metal work. Probably seen me use this a fair bit as well. So this is just a weld through primer that I put on things that I can't get to after the fact. So this is the array of tools that I'd use to do general rust repair work. So as I do more and more of this sort of work, I'm forever growing my tool arsenal. One of the next things that I really want to get is a shrinker stretcher. So for doing the sheet metal work, I can make all my corner pieces and things like that. After I've got that one, I think I'll be looking at getting a bead roller and maybe even an English wheel. So obviously I want to be able to do a lot more of this sort of work moving forwards, and being able to do a lot of it yourself is very rewarding. So I look forward to being able to kit my shed out a bit better in the future and be able to keep tackling these projects. Thanks again for watching. If you enjoy this content, give it a thumbs up. If you haven't already, subscribe to the page, and we'll see you on the next video. Thanks again.